Welcome. Just want to thank you all again for joining us. I know some of you were here in our first meeting. I'm seeing some fresh faces here. I think it's really important to know that your voice is heard. Tonight we're going to see basically a first draft of what the DCAMM property will look like in the future. There will be opportunity to ask questions, obviously. I think they're going to be meeting with the select board the 18th. Feel free to come and join that meeting if there's some additional questions or comments you want to add. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Adam Bakke from DCAMM, who's going to start the process and walk us through what we're going to see tonight. Thank you so much.
Mess up your mic here a little bit. You had it nicely laid out there. All right. Well, very good then. Good evening, everybody. I'm for those who don't know me, I'm Adam Bakke. I'm the commissioner at DCAMM, and I'm starting to really enjoy spending time out here in Lancaster, and looking forward to continuing to do so with you all. And that's actually partly for fun, but partly true. And what I think is really important is that we continue to see this as a collaborative and an iterative process. So we were here about a month ago, and I see a lot of familiar faces from about a month ago. I also see some new faces, which is wonderful. And we heard a lot from you all. We also heard a lot from you in other forums, from some of the other meetings that were held that week, to the notes that people have left on the boards, and even where you've placed your red dots. And that information has begun to feed the development of a vision for the property. But rather than just sort of accepting that we heard you and we're moving on, we want to make sure that we sort of create a bit of a back and forth process with everybody. And so part of why we're here tonight, at a very early point in beginning to frame what a master plan for this site might look like, is to get you to tell us, yep, you got that right. That's exactly what we were looking for. Or, you know, maybe this part over here isn't quite what we were thinking. We'd like to see you think about it a little bit differently. While we have a chance to continue to evolve it and improve it toward a collective vision. And that really is our goal. It's what we stated before, and it continues to be that the Commonwealth, while the Commonwealth is the owner of this property and we will be the ones selling it for development, we are very interested in making sure that that development is something that the neighbors and others in the community feel proud of and feel reflects a collective sense of what that property should be in its next iteration. There are definitely state goals. Most important and foremost among them is that we are in a severe housing challenge across the state. We literally have, for decades, underbuilt relative to demand, and we passed, I think, a very daunting milestone in June, where for the first time the median home price in all of Greater Boston, which I believe extends all the way out here to Lancaster, was over $1 million. And if you think about maybe your children who are now young adults like mine, there is a reason one of mine lives in the basement and the other one lives in the attic. It's because they cannot afford to buy a home or rent a home around here. Or maybe you're a senior who has a large home and wants to downsize to something that's easier to maintain, but they just don't exist. They're not available, and if they are, they're priced at such a ridiculous level that it doesn't make sense. We really do need housing for our own families and for ourselves. And so that is a very important factor, and the state is trying to do what it can toward that on a lot of levels, and one of them is to use state property that's no longer needed for state functions. But we don't want to just come in and say, okay, we're going to do that, whatever. We really want to engage with you all, and we want to make sure, again, that this is something that you'll feel proud of. And that's why we've hired Speck Dempsey, who I consider to be one of the premier planning and design firms literally in the country for designing new places, new neighborhoods, new villages, new communities. And I think we are really glad that they have decided to spend the kind of time they're spending here in Lancaster to really understand the place and listen to you folks. And we're going to try to translate that into a vision that we can all be proud of. With that, I'd like to introduce Chris Dempsey, who's going to talk you through a little bit of a presentation, but we are going to make sure we have a fair amount of time today to hear from you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Dempsey, a co-founder of Speck Dempsey with my partner Jeff, and Jeff will be our next speaker. I want to just start with some thank yous tonight. First, John Woodsmall, your new town administrator, who's just been a terrific resource to us throughout this process. Thank you, John. I want to thank Dave Carr from the Select Board and Ralph Gifford from the Select Board for being here and representing the town so well. And Ralph, I know you've been asked by your colleagues on the Select Board to help make sure that what we're showing tonight and in future meetings will actually happen. And so thank you for holding us accountable for that, and we look forward to working with you on that process. And then I also want to thank Steve Kerrigan, who's a familiar face to all of you as the former chair of the Select Board here. Steve has been another great resource for us as we think about how to really build another great neighborhood in Lancaster, a town that has so many existing great neighborhoods and places. So Steve, as I did last time, I'm going to ask you to come up at the end of the presentation and help us with the Q&A because you are that familiar face and you know the names of probably 2/3 of the people or more in the room, so we appreciate you helping with that. My last thank you is just to the folks in the back with Sterling-Lancaster TV who do an amazing job of producing events like this. And if you're in the room tonight and you were not at the July 15th meeting, I strongly encourage you, if you haven't already, to go to the town website and follow the link to the YouTube video of the July 15th presentation. Not only was it extremely well produced by the crew in the back, and again, we're thankful to them, but it really lays out how our urban planning firm, Speck Dempsey, approaches projects like this as we think about how to build these great neighborhoods. So if you are not here in July, please do watch this video. It provides a lot of context for what you're going to see tonight. Our firm is the lead planning firm in this initiative. We are working for DCAMM and more broadly for the town and for all of you to lead this effort. But we have two other firms that we're working with. One is Nelson Nygaard, which has expertise in transportation planning and also on regulation that leads to zoning, as well as Dane Torpy, which is a law firm that has an arm that specializes in zoning as well. And you're going to see more of each of those firms in the weeks and the months ahead. This is a timeline slide that is too small and too detailed to go into, so I like to instead show this slide, which is the basics of the process that we are in right now. We're in sort of steps 1 and 2 now, which is engaging all of you and undertaking this planning effort. And you're going to see the early results of that planning effort when my partner Jeff presents in a minute. After that is complete, we will then move into a zoning process where we will be asking you as residents and citizens of this town to approve a zoning change this fall that will allow a project to move forward along the lines of what you're going to see in the plan. So you play a crucial role in this process, and really after Labor Day, we're going to be starting that zoning and regulatory process in earnest. We hope that you as citizens will approve a zoning change this year, this calendar year, which then next year will allow DCAMM to undertake a process where they seek out a developer that wants to build what it is that we've presented and that you've approved in the zoning. And then after that, the land would be sold by the state to that developer and the project would get built. But that's all 2026 and forward. Our focus for now is this planning exercise followed by the zoning exercise that accompanies it. Okay, so what have we heard from you and your neighbors so far in this process? This is an attempt at just kind of an overview or a summary of what we have heard in the various engagement exercises that we've had. A lot of you were here on July 15th and participated in the events that we had. We had an open studio at the Thayer Memorial Library for much of the afternoon on the 15th, and then in the evening, we were all in this room, and you were able to hear how we plan neighborhoods and then give us some feedback and ask us questions about the process. We were also back on July 31st for the Concert on the Green series. Unfortunately, that was a really rainy and stormy day, so there was not huge attendance at that, but we were able to talk to 100% of the people that showed up because of that, so we were really glad about that. And we've also heard from a number of you via email. Our email address for this project is lancaster@speckdempsey.com. So please email us and let us know what you're thinking and what you want to see in this plan. And yes, I blacked out the names to protect the innocent, but I think some of you were in the room that wrote these emails. Okay, so some of the major themes here, they include the town budget and the school impact and impact on other services, water and sewer, housing, traffic, historic preservation, and community character. These are the kinds of comments that we've received and that we've heard. I'm not going to go into all of these in detail, but I will just share some highlights. Of course, with town budget, we've heard your concerns about school population in particular, and we will be opening the conversation about that tonight, by no means concluding it. That's going to be an ongoing one throughout the process, but we know that that's important to many of you. Water and sewer, we know the town's existing capacity is limited, and there needs to be a conversation about how this project fits into that capacity, and also there's interest in whether this site could host a town well, and of course how sewer will work as well, and we're very aware that water and sewer are sort of separate in this community. On housing, and you see this in the dots that have been placed on the posters, a lot of interest in senior housing. I think an encouraging interest in young professional housing. A lot of folks saying that they'd like a place for their kids or their grandkids to live in town, or even for town employees, younger town employees, to be able to work and live in town. There's understanding that the town is under the 10% safe harbor limit for 40B, and there's interest from many of you in trying to increase the affordable housing supply to get over that limit, to gain some more control over the process. So those are some of the themes that we've heard. On traffic, some of you have said that you really would like to see the kind of front of this development along Still River Road, where there are fewer existing residents, to try to ease any potential burden on Old Common Road. Historic preservation is a big theme. We know that many of you cherish the historic buildings that are on the site. You cherish just the history of the site and how important it is as the first girls' reform school in the entire country, and the model that it became for other states and even other countries around the world. So we want to honor that history and preserve as much as we can. And community character. We know that you've chosen to live in Lancaster because of that history, because of the community that you have with each other, and you don't want to see a radical change to that through this development. You want to see development that really enhances and is consistent with what you love about the town today. And again, those comments and themes are reflected in where you've placed dots. You can see here some of the numbers after the July 15th event, where you place dots in terms of the types of housing that you want to see. You can see, not as much interest in super large multifamily, but an openness to multifamily and to townhomes as an important part of the breadth of housing that would be available to people. And here, as we looked at priorities, again, I mentioned this, I was really encouraged to see, for example, the interest in housing for young professionals, and of course, very strong interest in housing for seniors, as well as preservation of green space and other priorities. Okay, town budget and school costs. And Roy, I was intentional about putting you up here because I know you're the guy with the spreadsheets. So we're just opening the conversation tonight. This is by no means conclusive, but we wanted to provide a perspective that we had looking at some kind of higher level numbers about school trends, school population trends, and then your just community population trends and projections that have been produced by some research institutes associated with UMass. So this is the Rowlandson Elementary total enrollment numbers going all the way back to 1995 up to today. And you can see that the peak was around 2010, 2011, and that you're actually below that peak right now in terms of the total school population. You can see the trend here sort of slightly up, but you're still under that trend. And if you look at the mean of the last 20 years, there's 481 students, the median is 477 students, and you're currently at 473. So kind of right at or a little bit below the mean or the median number of students in this building over the last 20 years. This is just the kindergarten numbers for the Rowlandson Elementary School, which I thought were really interesting. You can see that the peak is actually all the way back in 1996 for the peak kindergarten population. And the trend over time has been a little bit downward in terms of the youngest students, which of course become older students and end up being high school students. So you're today at 64 versus the high of 88, and you are below, over the last 20 years, both the mean and the median in terms of kindergarten enrollment at the Rowlandson Elementary School. Let's look just quickly at the broader population trends. And these are from the UMass Donahue Institute, which is a very well-respected think tank that does research, in this case, on behalf of the Commonwealth. So Secretary of State Galvin actually commissioned this report. And they did a population study of every community across the entire Commonwealth, all 351 cities and towns. And I want to be very clear here that the goal of that study was not to pinpoint population projections for any individual community. So the numbers you're going to see here are by no means meant to be an exact projection or estimate of what the future holds. They're just meant to sort of reflect broader trends at the local, county, and state level. The higher up you go, the more accurate these numbers are. The lower down you go, the less accurate they are. And they do not include projections related to specific developments. So when you think about this development or you think about Atlantic Union College, those are not included in these numbers, to be very clear. Again, they're just sort of broader demographic trends. So here's the Commonwealth as a whole. You can see that the estimates are the population for Massachusetts peaks in 10 or 15 years and then actually starts to go down. And that's mostly a function of just the aging population. Here it is for Worcester County. It's a pretty similar trend to the Commonwealth as a whole. Kind of peaks in 10 or 15 years and then starts to go down from there. Now, in contrast, here's the Town of Lancaster's projections. And again, these are based on demographic information. So the estimate from the Donahue Institute is that your population is going to drop over the next 30 years because of the basic demographics of your community. And here's the comparison with the Commonwealth at the top, again, kind of a slightly increasing and then mostly flat line compared to Lancaster's numbers. Now, the Donahue Institute also broke this out by age cohort. And you can see that in this pretty complicated graph here. Hard to read, right? But that black line at the top is exactly the same level or amount as what you saw on the prior slide. For school population, we can zero in on just the population of people from, I think it's age 5 to 19. So I've done that in this slide. So this is the Donahue Institute's estimate for your school-aged population looking 25 years out from today. And you can see that the downward trend that you see overall in town population is really accentuated when it comes to younger people. And again, that's just a function of demographics and an aging population. So this is by no means definitive. We are not reaching any conclusions from this data at all, but just trying to open up a conversation about where those trends are headed as we think about this development maybe moving forward and bringing some new population to town. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague and partner, Jeff Speck, who you heard from in July. We're really pleased to be sharing the results of the early results, preliminary results of this planning exercise. We'll go into some real detail, almost street by street or sort of section by section of what this new neighborhood could be, so you can get a feel for what we're thinking. And then really the last hour of tonight is us hearing from you with questions, your comments, your feedback as we continue that conversation. So thanks again for being here tonight, for being open to this conversation and this opportunity, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jeff.
Thank you, Chris. That's me. Who was here who was not here last time? Please be bold and raise your hand. Okay, about half of you. So did any of you manage to catch the online video of last time? Raise your hand if you did. Okay, one of you. So Chris mentioned that. Does everyone know how to find that at the town website? Is that something that's obvious? Okay. If there are any questions, please just ask about that. The reason I ask is that I'm not going to repeat almost anything from the talk last time because I wanted to spend the time focusing on the plan. But what we did last time was we talked about, it was called what was it called? What Makes a Great Neighborhood? And it talked about the planning approach, the theory, the practice that we bring to making new places We've been making new places for many decades now, and I'm going to show you pictures of some of them that, yes, I did show last time briefly. But there's a real science to making places that people actually feel are better than the nature that they displace. And my mentor, Andre Swanee, used to say, in the case of some projects, if you lose a farm and you gain a town, that's an even trade. It's when you lose a farm and gain, a strip center or a housing subdivision, maybe it's not an even trade. But if you can trade nature or agriculture for culture, then that's something that people really appreciate. And we like to think that the projects we've worked on over the years, that their property values indicate the amount that they are appreciated. So I did want to show, for the purposes of tonight, a couple plans that led to places, because I'm going to be showing you a plan tonight for the industrial school, and when you look at that plan, I want you to perhaps have a little bit of understanding, or a little more understanding, of how what you see on paper in 2 dimensions might build up into the 3rd dimension, into streets and squares and parks and public spaces that people can enjoy. So this is a plan for a new neighborhood that we did that I finally got to visit a couple months ago, or even just a month ago, in outside of Denver, and the sort of housing that you see in that plan. Here's one in Alabama, outside of Huntsville, and some row houses in that plan. Here's another one in Alabama and outside of Birmingham, with cottages. Most of these projects, as the one that I'll be discussing tonight, have this variety of housing type in them, so that you get lots of different types of households and types of people in the community. This is a resort that's become a year-round community called Rosemary Beach, down in the Florida Panhandle, which has some pedestrian streets, which is a feature that we're proposing for this development as well. This is a new town in South Carolina, outside of Charleston, that's modeled on Charleston. It's called Ion, and some larger houses in that development along a new canal. Here's a project in Middleton, Wisconsin, Frank Lloyd Wright area, and we created a Frank Lloyd Wright, a pro-prairie style architectural code. So this is what that one looks like. Here's one in Canada, on Niagara on the Lake. Combination of, you see single-family homes in the foreground and row houses in the background. So just a few examples of other places and the plans that make them. And I hope when you see these plans and you see the characteristics that they share, which is small blocks, pedestrian streets as well as vehicular streets, green public spaces that are shared, a variety of building types, and other things than just houses. That's the sort of plan that I'll be showing you tonight for this site as well. So we feel we have a lucky location. We like the proximity to the center of Lancaster and being framed by Still River Road and by Old Common Road. For those of you who aren't, or really for me, so I can refresh my memory of the names that are in the plan, but for those of you who aren't as familiar, the site is located sandwiched between Still River Road to the north and Old Common Road to the south. The boundary that runs down the west side of the site opens to some nice buildings within the RFK Lancaster School. This plan does not contemplate redeveloping any of that property. You see the Still River Road actually keeps going, but the Route 110, which takes its name, Still River Road, takes a left turn here and has kind of a wedge-shaped intersection, which could very easily be a four-way intersection, providing a convenient entrance into the site. There's a gas easement that runs up Sand Road, which is on the east end of our property, and then the property actually extends beyond it. The gas easement turns, but the road turns, but the gas easement continues across the property. So that's a limitation as well. And then, of course, what you're also seeing in this image is beautiful open spaces, lots of great trees, and some pretty fantastic historic buildings, about half of which have been designated as savable and worth saving. So we we took the advice of the Historical Commission in terms of what buildings that we recommend saving within the plan. I just want to note that the plan is organized around these buildings in such a way that if they're not saved, I should say, the plan does not cause any buildings to be eliminated. And if a building is not saved, that doesn't change the plan. However, we're enamored of the historic buildings that are in the plan, and we're hopeful that the economics of saving all of the ones that we've designated is possible. Looking at the site, beautiful trees. I know that the site's effectively off limits, although it's pretty, I shouldn't say that. You can sneak on. But maybe many of you following the rules have not been on the site lately. But it has great trees and great trees and great trees. It has beautiful open fields lined by hedgerows of pines, a lot of beautiful white pines on the site. This is the easement that's itself a wonderful sand road is a road of sand, but it's a good place for a future road lined by pines on both sides that don't need to come down. And then there's these wonderful remnants left over from the school, like this path that you see with the foundation for benches along it, which actually is a V-shaped path that goes in two directions. Wonderful little streets on the site that we principally want to use as foundations for our future streets, or simply as the future streets. And then some of the historic buildings that are on the site that are deemed savable and recommended for saving, including the chapel here, the old school building. This is a building that is not considered historically significant, but it's in very good shape. We call it the storehouse. That's just behind the school building. That seems like a developer would probably want to take advantage of using that as well, so we included that. There's the old barn that is half designated as contributing and kind of half not, but the two halves look kind of the same. And the idea that it could be saved, or honestly, because it's a very simple building, simply replaced by a building of similar shape and size, seems like a good approach. Then there's a couple buildings in quite good shape, including this one, which is the current DCAMM offices on the site, and this other one also in rather good shape that are understood to be saved. And I'll show you where those are on the plan. And then finally, there's the single-family house that has some historical significance as well. It's not the best looking building in its current shape, but it's actually got really good bones, and that's also been designated for saving, so we kept it in the plan. There's some great conditions on the site, like this little street that runs along 6 trees, and then there's a gap, and then there's 6 more trees, and then aims at the front of the old office building. I want to mention that there was an earlier plan, a number of earlier plans that I believe that the town commissioned for the site as well, that we studied as we were considering our work. I have to say, in all lack of humility, that the earlier schemes do not really trace the existing streets, trees, and other natural features on the site in the way that we like to. So if you compare this aerial with this plan, which I did my best to overlay them on top of each other, you'll find the principal moves in the plan don't relate to the underlying street network or trees. A lot of trees have been added that aren't there now, and a lot of trees that are there now have been taken away. We use a very different approach, where we start with what's called a green print. And this is the first thing we did when we got to the site, which was to identify, first of all the old trees that seem really special. So there's more old trees than these on the site, but it's easy for me to love a tree, and every tree that I fell in love with is here in bright green. And our plan does its best, and I think keeps almost every single one of these trees. Secondly, there are the hedgerows. So you see the collections of pines, principally pines, that are running in long strands in different locations around the site and through the site, and those become part of the green print as well, because those are very important space makers. They define edges and make wonderful street spaces in the plan. And then you also see the historic buildings that seem worth saving. Among the ones that can be saved, they include the chapel, which is here, the school, which is there, the storehouse, which is there. There's a little kitchen building next to it that is no great shakes, but it's not in the way. So we said, let's keep showing that in the plan. There's the 2 office buildings, 1, 2 in the plan. This is a cute little building that I felt that I liked, but actually we had to get rid of it in our current plan. But it's not designated in any way. And then there's the barn. The barn is here, the front piece and the back piece, and then this is the old White House that I showed you on the site. So those are the buildings that I showed you pictures of a minute ago. No, here's one of 2 plans. So the exercise we did was to first do 2 entirely different plans and not talk to each other. So another designer named Lawrence Kamar, who's built many of these projects like I have, and I each approached the green print. We both had the green print lying under our light tables. And we did plans on the green print, trying to absorb the existing streets wherever we could, and I didn't mention that. But the other thing you notice in the green print, are all of these existing streets, paths, and other ways around the site, which we feel contain a certain amount of intelligence in them. They were laid out at a time when people were just smart. So Lawrence did a plan and I did a plan, and we're not going to take much time on them except to say that this is often our strategy, because we want as many ideas as we can have, and we want to fight and argue and try to win and try to have the best plan. But we learn from each other, and ultimately what you're going to see is a plan that merges the best elements of both plans. So this was plan A, and this was plan B. And probably from where you're sitting, they don't look all that different, but actually they're very different. And I'll show you that they're different in the sense that this is the street network of one, and this is the street network of another. So quite different, even though the key streets are still there. This is the pedestrian network of one, and this is the pedestrian network of the other. So still quite different. This is the private space of one and the private space of the other. And then this is the civic spaces of one and the civic spaces of the other. And then finally, this is the open space of one and the open space of the other. So they're similar in their technique, but they're rather different in how they're laid out, and we used that and the numbers that they generated in terms of number of lots, amount of apartments and retail and other things, to merge them into one plan. And so here's the green print, and here's the plan that we've landed on right now. And it's a lot to take in, and Chris didn't want me to spend an hour on this, and I'm not. But I'm going to try to walk you through. I'm going to try to walk you through the plan in a way that allows you to understand it a little bit better. Oh, and here's the fade. I do one fade per show. Here's the fade. So what I hope you see when I do this back and forth fade, which I worked really hard to align, is that most of the streets and patterns on the site are still there. And we're really respecting and learning from the way that the existing layout took advantage of the site. So let's start. In the northern part of the plan, we got the consensus, and my original plan didn't do this, but we got the consensus from the folks who came to the last meeting and who met with us after the meeting, and further conversations we had with the town and other representatives after that, that people did not want a commercial center on Old Common Road. And that the proper approach for Old Common Road was to basically have single-family homes, large lot single-family homes, that there's a term in planning, like against like. So there's single-family homes on one side of the street. The smart thing to do is to create a consistent environment. We put single-family homes on the other side of the street. There was interest in seeing a small commercial development so that people who need cat food or want to go to daycare or do other things like that, services and a small amount of retail, could have it in the community, right? Keep those trips off the street. And it was told to us that the best place for it was up against 110 or Still River Road. So what you see here is one of the few locations in the plan where we're proposing apartments. And you see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 apartment buildings. These are probably 3 stories tall. They have a central hallway and apartments on either side of that hall, so that the type that developers can build profitably. They have parking hidden in the back and hidden in the back. But what you can't see as well, the color changes are very subtle. This building on the corner, very visible from the road, and these two, framing a location where the road has been treated like a plaza, are the ones that are imagined as retail or daycare or other services, or just not strictly residential. So this is the social heart of the community. I would love it if you have a cafe or maybe a little restaurant, and a great place for daycare and other stuff. All of the buildings you see here are apartments, but only these 3 are imagined as having commercial ground floors, including services and daycare. That adds up to about 25,000 square feet, which is a significant amount of retail, but not a lot. What you see here in the low-lying area, which is half wetland buffer, but not wet, is a soccer field, which could be soccer, could have baseball on top of it as well. It's big enough to be a recreational area. And then what you see, starting to describe the variety of housing types, what you see here are small, see these narrower lots? These are row house lots. And I'll show you what row houses look like in typical projects. And then these lots that you see here are what we'd call bungalow lots. These lots hold smaller houses that are rather close to each other, but they don't share a party wall. They're not row houses. And then these lots here, for example, on the very edge, are what we call large lots, and they hold big houses. So you have the variety of big houses, row houses, apartments, and bungalows all in one place. You also have here in one of the office buildings preserved, and over here, and I added this with no one's permission, and we'll see how folks react, but typically when we do a neighborhood like this, folks want to have, particularly the developer wants to have a small recreational component with a club and a pool and a pickleball. So what you see here is a club and a pool and pickleball that happens to terminate a view down a pedestrian street in this location, which we'll look at more in a minute. But then this is the town center. There's one beautiful tree right here in the green. See it? One beautiful tree, and we save that there. The hedgerow that you see there is preserved through the plan as well. The office building there is preserved. So this gives you a sense of how this lays on its land. The next segment of the plan is a little bit further up, right? So there's the clubhouse area we talked about. So this is overlapping. Here we have a street that curves along the area that becomes wet behind it. There's a perimeter walking, jogging, recreational path along the whole edge. That's something that was requested. And then we begin to kick into a street network that you see is taking advantage of where the trees are located on the site. For example, here is an existing hedgerow, and so we put a narrow rear lane on either side of it, and now you have houses facing this way on a pedestrian street, and houses facing this way on a little square. This little square is where the gas easement keeps going, but the sand road turns away. With the idea that Sand Road may someday be a real road, it made sense to have a connection into the neighborhood right here. Now, there's an important thing happening to the north that you can barely see on this map, which is that where Still River Road turns north, we're actually creating an intersection directly across from it. That's a connection that's currently missing through the site. So if you're coming from the north and you want to go south to the what road extension? Mill Road extension? To the Mill Road extension, right now you have to go down, over, back, and down. And there's some interesting stuff down there. There's some addresses down there that people need to get to. With this plan in place, you will be able to go through our neighborhood in order to get to the Mill Road extension. And the way to do that is by simply coming through this intersection and coming down this part of the site. So moving right along, you see a beautiful path that has the bench skeletons along it there, has become a pedestrian path. The other path with the bench skeletons on it is right there. We're running a street along it. And then between this low road that hugs the wetland and rises up to where the storehouse is and this higher path, we have these pedestrian streets that are cutting through the plan. So these are homes on pedestrian streets like the ones I showed you in Rosemary Beach. Then you have a pretty normal block here with the pedestrian street down the middle. This is actually the rhythm of streets that we used in Rosemary Beach, where you have, it's an A, B, C, B, A rhythm. Street, rear lane, pedestrian street, rear lane, street. And that allows you to, park very close to your house, wherever you are. The rear lanes are a key part of the work that we do because they allow the fronts of the houses to not be the garage doors. So most new neighborhoods we build, and many builders now do, with the rear lane and the rear garage, so that the fronts can be friendly with front porches and stoops and other things, and not the noses of garages, what they call snout houses. So in this part of the plan, here's the existing topo and trees, and you can see how that is overlaid there. And then moving along, now we are at the main green. So what you see here is the chapel and the schoolhouse. And this plan creates a large green that embraces both the chapel and the schoolhouse. There's a nice walk right down the middle. This is a street that's coming in past the barns. And so you enter the neighborhood down here, and then you're on the central green, which really belongs to the neighborhood, right? It's tucked within the neighborhood. It's located because there are a lot of great trees through here. There's a number of different techniques for dealing with trees. Sometimes you just put them in the middle of a block that's got large lots so the houses can dance around them, and sometimes you accentuate them within public greens and show them off. Either way, you're saving them. But this is the main green then with these buildings, and you can see there are row houses here, there are large lot houses here, row houses here, and bungalows are there. And this is from the air and the plan there. And then here we are on the southern end against Old Common Road. And you see the existing white house here, you see the barn, the two pieces of the barn. You see the strategy we've used, which is to place only large single-family lots in a rhythm, marching down Old Colony Road. The lots are just as big as, well, at least just as wide, at least. I don't know how deep your lots are, but they're just as wide as the lots that are marching along on the other side of the street. Another thing that's happened is the Mill Road extension here has been used as the place. We've moved this street from where it exists right now here and placed it across from the Mill Road extension. So now there's a very rational path, as I described, through the plan. It's not a straight line because we don't want people speeding through. If they want to come through our neighborhood, the traffic is not that heavy. It'll be the sort of slow-moving vehicles because of the way the street network's designed that doesn't allow speeding. And when you come in, of course, you're looking at the barn, and then you angle off and you're looking up the green. But notice what's happened to the barn building. I imagine this could be, and it's fully hidden from the street by these single-family lots, but I imagine this could be another type of apartment building. So if you put apartments in the barn, and there's a lot of room back there to have maybe another wing of apartments here, another wing of apartments here. These are not corridor-fed, full-width, full-size apartment buildings like the ones I showed you, the town center. These are a bit smaller. They're narrower. They would be, cross-ventilated units with point entries. They wouldn't be on a hallway. So there was also some interest in elderly housing or some sort of, facility that would be, independent living or something. This would be an ideal site for that as well in that location. And here's the existing aerial, and here's the plan. We spend a lot of time looking at, and I wanted to mention the single-family character of Old Common Road as it goes past the site. I wanted to mention some of another technique that we love to use that's called the terminated vista. And it basically means aiming things at things. So, for example, one key aspect of this plan is that it connects the transept of the chapel with the corner of the office building. So you've got this and this looking at each other. So it's kind of like Colonial Williamsburg when you're on that main street. There's a civic building or a civic feeling building on either side of the street. Similarly, you look at this straight shot, entering and aiming right at the front of the chapel, or from this point, going up the walk and aiming right at the front of the schoolhouse. So this is the view on that first arrow, this is off to the side, but this is the building that the second arrow is looking at. And then additionally, views of the barn. This street currently comes from west to east and aims at the facade of the barn right now. Additionally, as I mentioned, the new street coming in would aim at the barn. So that's the view of that east-west street, again, which is celebrated, the barn being at a high point on the site. And then finally, the idea that this pedestrian street is aiming at the new community club. We won't call it a club, that sounds pretentious. We'll just call it the community center. Community center or rec center with pool and pickleball perhaps, and then this vista aiming at the new apartments at the town center. And then finally, this view, and this building was sited with a little colonnade in the front to absorb views all the way down from here. So a lot of thought goes into that in the plan as well. So we did this plan, honestly, we did the plan that we thought felt right for the site. We don't know Lancaster as well as you do, but we had a sense from the meetings and the conversations about what felt right to you all. We saw the Post-its on the board. We tried to make a mix that was healthy. We tried to create about the right amount of open space. And in our experience, too much open space or too big open spaces don't work socially, as well as having lots of smaller open spaces, which is what we put in the plan. And when we did that, that ended up with these numbers. So we didn't work from the numbers to the plan. We worked from the plan to the numbers. And I'm going to go through these numbers. But before I do, I want to say the plan can be, and we hope that we're confident that with DCAMM we can create a process that allows flexibility. I know you're going to want to have ceilings in terms of how many bedrooms on the site, but below that ceiling, the plan I've showed you would work. I mean, if you look at it, these large lots could be subdivided into smaller lots. These smaller lots could be consolidated into larger lots, right? These 6 row houses could be 2 single-family houses. And what I try to impress upon my clients is that what matters is the public realm. What matters is the design of the streets. What matters is the street trees we put every 30 feet on center everywhere. What matters is the small public spaces and the pedestrian streets and the mixed use and the variety of homes and all the characteristics that add up to a great place. But honestly, if some of these houses become row houses, some of these row houses become apartments, some of these apartments become single family, it doesn't change that. And the planning we do also determines, where the fronts of the buildings go and encourages them to have porches and balconies and other social attachments. So all those things can be put in the rule, even if there's still flexibility for developers to follow the market where the market might take them. So we can create a coding instrument, a zoning package effectively that will allow what matters to be certain, but will potentially allow for some flexibility in these numbers, because now I'm going to show you these numbers and you might not like them, right? So, so basically, that plan turned out having 85 units, and we just size an apartment unit at 1,000 square feet gross. That's about what you see in the market today. So there's about 85,000 square feet in those red buildings that we chose to, or we were asked to preserve and chose to preserve. So 85 units are in those older buildings. The additional multifamily in that collection to the north where you enter and attached to the barn add up to 100, oh no, I'm sorry, just the ones to the north. Remember there was 25,000 square feet of retail? Just in that collection of 5 buildings, there's 100 apartments, or 100,000 square feet of apartments. The barn site, as I drew it, there's room for 40 more units on that site. And we're talking 3-story buildings for those. Row houses, in the current plan, there are 67. Bungalows, there's currently 61. And larger single-family lots, there are 33. Now, because I know folks care, we actually averaged beds per unit for these different types, which was our estimate as to how many beds each unit would hold. And that added up to these totals, which add up to 854 bedrooms. So that's what this plan yielded as we chose to distribute the different housing types. But everyone understands that can change, right? I mean, you're going to want to legislate certain limits, I know, but just understand the plan is very flexible in terms of how it's distributed among the different types. So what do these buildings look like? This building actually breaks the rule. It's got a 4th story. But this is what we imagine and what we've built in other projects when we talk about shops under apartments. It's got a hallway down the middle, It's got apartments above, and it's got shops below. This is one of our projects in Beaufort, South Carolina. This is what we imagine when we say row houses. And row houses can be 2-story, they can have a 3rd story in the roof. They tend to be about 22 feet wide, but as we've shown them, but that varies. They look like that. And then there's bungalows. So the smaller houses that are about the size of a row house, but don't touch, and so the lots, rather than being 22 feet wide, are about 33 feet wide. And this is what you get. Again, it's the alley at the rear. It's the lane, not this one. Well, this has a lane at the rear too, but it's the lane at the rear that makes these so friendly. And that's why that's an important part of our plan. And then these are what the big houses look like. This happens to be a Charleston-style version of the big house. But people build houses like this when you give them a big lot, or they have more of a ranch-style house and more of a yard, but these are certainly possible on the bigger lots. So that is the plan as it exists in its current state. And as was said, we really welcome your input. I spent 2 hours on the site today, and there are things I want to change. So it's okay if you want to change it too, because we understand that we're not at all through this process. So now I'll welcome Chris back to the stage and welcome you guys to the mic. If there's anything like last time, you might want to line up. But are we doing that yet? Are we ready? So folks, we do encourage comments to be microphone comments so they can be recorded. And the sooner you line up, the sooner you can speak. But thank you for your attention. We're so excited about this plan. We plan all over. I happen to live very close to here. I've always wanted an opportunity like this close to home. And I'm understanding it can change. I really do love this plan. And Lawrence, the other designer, and I were just really having a lot of fun with it and exclaiming how well the site, how well disposed the site was to make a good plan. So we do think we're very proud of this work, and we're very hopeful to see it built in some form similar to what we showed you tonight. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And so I'll invite Commissioner Bakke back up for public comment. And Steve, thank you as always for helping us sort of moderate and be a friendly face. Lisa Veracki from DCAMM had a COVID exposure a day ago, so she's usually up here with us, and she's the project manager. She's not able to be here tonight, but she will be watching the video and recording when it's available, so she'll be taking in those comments as well. So please come up to the microphone, and we welcome your questions and comments, and I will hand the microphone over to Steve.
Should we sit?
Yeah. All right, well, you heard the man. Come down to the microphone, tell us your name, just as we do at town meeting, your name and where you live, and then hit us with a comment or a question. Go right ahead.
So, Vijay Madhavi, I live on Bolton Station Road, been there for about 3 years, coming up on 3 years. So, I love the approach on keeping the existing buildings, the trees and everything, and the way that you guys designed it off the existing roadways is great. My concern is the size. Can I assume that 854 beds equals 854 individuals or population growth?
I actually don't know anything about how beds turn into individuals. The typical home in Massachusetts probably has more beds, many more beds than individuals.
Okay. I guess my one concern is if we were to even take the size of this and overlay it to the population of Lancaster, let's call it 8,000 people, and you are potentially bringing in 500, 600 people to this area, you are basically increasing entire Lancaster by potentially 8 to 10% population into a very isolated section. In a part of the town that has historically been pretty quiet, hasn't seen a population growth like this, I'd be concerned about the surrounding areas and how the roadways and everything else could support such a large size growth like that. Now I know you guys were mentioning that this is just a simple plan, right? This isn't what the end all would be. I would lean towards making it maybe a less densely populated version than what was presented here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Linnea.
Linnea Lake and Servey, 1394 Main Street. I think it's too dense, but I like the presentation overall. Increasing the population by that amount is kind of scary for the average person. What about affordable housing and over 55 housing? That would be less, over 55 is less drain on the schools, that kind of thing. How would that be incorporated?
Yeah. It's a great question, and we very much have heard the feedback about the interest in senior housing. We're not quite at that part of the plan yet to understand whether there would be or should be restrictions. Is there feedback? Is it? Yeah.
It's manageable. It's fine.
Is it okay? Yeah. I'll just back up a little bit. Yeah. So I think in future presentations, you'll see some more thoughts from us on what might be possible in terms of some restrictions or specialized housing that the community may want. What we wanted to show tonight, what we're able to show tonight, is kind of a higher level layout. The specifics in terms of housing specialization is going to come as we look more about what the market can bear and sort of what's how we fit these pieces together, because we haven't yet really dug in on questions about, like, okay, does the renovation of a historic building actually come at a cost to the developer, meaning that they need to make more profit on the new construction to be able to support and subsidize the renovation. And we're not going to have, that down to the penny, but we want to have a better feel for how those different pieces fit together before we can say to you, okay, there's going to be X number of affordable housing units or X number of senior housing units.
I mean, in that context, though, I would add that we believe in creating complete communities. Young people benefit from being around old people. Old people really benefit from being around young kids. Poor people benefit from being around wealthy people, and vice versa. So we try to create the greatest variety of housing type to at least allow that to happen. Whether there need to be additional rules or limitations in place to ensure that to happen, or whether you wish to mitigate against that, is a separate issue from the plan itself, which is about showing a variety, the greatest possible variety of type and tenure of housing.
A follow-on question. The single-family homes and the row houses, what would the price be? I mean, are people going to be able to afford to go there? The affordable housing would be affordable, obviously, and the apartment buildings would be owned by a management company. But we really need to, if we're going to have that much, we want to make sure it's affordable.
Right. So I'm just going to step in for a second. I don't think they can be expected to answer the price of the houses that'll be for sale, built by somebody else. I will point out, though, when you bring up affordability, apartments lead to more affordable options. A lot of folks put the sticker on housing for young professionals. Apartments help accommodate that. Row houses and more affordable options for folks lead to more, but it does lead to more density. So you have to balance all those things. Okay, who's next? Bruce. Oh, well, you can come. You can get in line too. Yeah. Okay. Well, Bruce, get in line.
Bruce Williams, Old Common Road. I want a canal. I really like a canal.
Bruce, one for canal. Got it.
So I live on Old Common Road, and a big thing for me is traffic, walkable space, and looking at your presentation. To me, it looks dense. Where Old Common Road meets your projected project, are there sidewalks in between the road and the single-family homes?
Yes, so one of the things missing right now from the streetscape in that very deep setback along the north side of the street is any kind of sidewalk. There's a wonderful, depth there. You have 3 brilliant, huge white pines along the front there that are well back from the curb. We believe the curb should be planted with regular street trees, and then between those pines and those street trees, you'd have room for a lovely promenade. I'd probably do an 8-foot wide sidewalk through there.
Awesome. Are any of these roads one way?
No, and it doesn't make sense to us to do that because They wouldn't be handling, within our development, they wouldn't be handling very much traffic, and the two-way traffic actually causes people to drive more safely.
Because I was thinking, I'm not good at math, but there was 380 structures. That's 380 times 2 is 760, so that's minimum. Most folks have 2 cars. That's 760 extra cars that potentially could go back and forth through this neighborhood. Then if you have teenagers, which we have 2, they each have a car. So that's a lot of cars in this area that can either dump on Still River or Old Common. And if you spend any time on Old Common in the morning, the afternoon, people zoom back and forth on that road because it's a cutoff of 495. I'm just concerned about it being so dense with those large number of cars, and traffic for me is a big deal.
Are you concerned about congestion or speeding?
I'm concerned about the number of cars. I think your last presentation, you also talked about having narrow roads. If you think about, I'm not sure, what is it, where Dairy Queen is? In Clinton, they made the roads really narrow, and people park in the road, and that becomes a problem. So I'm not too excited about having narrow roads with people wanting to park in the way. I think it causes more problems. But again, I want a canal.
Bruce, I do want. Can you talk about how the parking is designed? Because it's been very intentional to be putting parking behind, and then
but there will be through streets. I talked last time about, well, I didn't get into detail about the 4 different types of flow: speed, free, slow, and yield. Speed is a highway, but free flow means you've got 10-foot lanes. If you've got a Dairy Queen or some other commercial use, or like our Main Street, you need to have those 10-foot lanes so that if someone does park, people are able to get through without causing any tie-ups. This project, like most of our projects, would have free flow lanes wherever there's a significant amount of traffic. Then they'd have slow flow lanes, which are still wide enough for a car, but more like 8 feet wide, to encourage slower speeds in the neighborhoods. And there'd be some tiny little streets that might even be yield flow, which is like a street that I grew up on, that you may have grown up on, because so few cars are using it. It might be serving 4 or 5, single-family homes. So we like to use the full range, but we wouldn't be requiring people to park in the driving lane in a mixed-use or commercial area. But I do want to say that we've done the best we can to solve the traffic problem, which is by connecting as many ways as possible, and to not have dead ends, cul-de-sacs, or to snip connections. So the first rule to limit the impact of traffic is to just have a very porous network, and we've done that. I don't disagree in any way with your assessment that more cars, more people is going to bring more driving to your streets. That's what happens with development. But I do think that we'll be able to capture a lot of trips internal to the project due to its mix of uses. And also, we do expect a lower car ownership per household than you'd find in a typical development, in part because it's so walkable, but secondly, because of the apartments and other things which are typically have 1 or 1.5 cars per unit.
That brings me to another point, Stephen. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Is this development restricted to like cars only, no trucks, no, because, Old Common and Still River 110, there's track trails going back and forth. So that would be good for the people that live there, to not have large vehicles travel through their neighborhood.
Well, a semi would not fit through.
Okay.
But a typical delivery truck would, and a fire truck, et cetera.
And my other question is, I'll be 60 in November if you guys want to.
Happy birthday.
There's only a few more days of buying left. But, at some point, my kid's going to have grandkids, and I want to be able to bring them to enjoy something's going to go over there. I don't know what, but something's going to go over there. But for instance, I'm not a pickleball guy, but I might want to play pickleball when I retire next year. But am I going to be able to go over there? Is there going to be restrictions about what the folks in Lancaster can access all of these things?
I think I could say we always fight that, and it never happens in our projects. But this is more of a DCAMM question, I think, about whether that's going to be, that sort of thing might be allowed.
I think what we talked about, what we heard, and we all talked about last time, was the idea that this wants to become a community asset for Lancaster. This does not want to be a gated community where only the people who have a pass card can get in.
Yeah, so not separate. It's
And really that
embedded in
goes
the
to
community.
the comments Jeff was making about the sort of porosity and diversity of the traffic network is really meant to have a lot of points of access and points of engagement, whether on foot or in a vehicle, to really make it open in a way that it frankly has not been for the last 150 years. And hopefully that turns this into, I mean, there's a pretty healthy amount of new open space and new public space in the development, and that's intended to be public for the whole public, not just the people who choose to buy homes in the property.
Bruce, I'll sort of try to sum that up, and we used this phrase last time, folks may remember. We want this to be a place where people go trick-or-treating. You are welcome to bring your kids in a costume and bring them trick-or-treating, and that's an example where a little bit of density is actually kind of nice, because the next house is a little closer when you knock on their door. But we want this to feel as welcoming as any place you would want to take your kids trick-or-treating anywhere in the town of Lancaster.
Grandkids.
Kids and grandkids.
But I will point out, they were very intentional. And I think for those of you who are familiar, the Mill Street Extension connection there, I think is going to be big. And because right now, to get to that property, most of us would go down through 5 Corners and up Old Common Road. I know it's 4 corners now, but 5 corners. And then into the property. This, because I grew up off of Mill Street Extension, would allow you to go straight across and not need to. So they're doing what they can with this design to really try to mitigate increasing traffic on Old Common Road. There's some element to which, right. It's going to be, but they're doing everything they can with the approach they're having to minimize it and give different access points to that. That's not just on Old Common Road.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm talking a lot, but I'll add one thing, which is this street network is much more intricate and much more complex and expensive than if someone was just to put in a bunch of cul-de-sacs, right? The typical way that neighborhoods are delivered these days is a collector road and then a bunch of lollipop cul-de-sacs. That allows the developer to have as little public space and invest as little money as possible in the public realm in order to sell as many houses as possible. This project has streets, it has alleys, it has pedestrian streets, it has tons of civic spaces. The only reason that works is because the density is higher than what you find in a cul-de-sac subdivision. It's the increased number of units that pay for the enhanced public realm. So while the plan can be made less dense, as I described, just understand that density becomes the reason for the developer to build it. And without a certain amount of density, it's no longer a profitable effort. So I would add that one caveat to the density discussion. It's not apples to apples. You're losing public amenities when you reduce density.
No. Oh, hi.
How are you?
Hi, I'm Susan Martin. I live on Bolton Station Road. And I like the design. I mean, I like the idea of having diversity in younger people, older people, seniors. And I've lived here for 26 years. And I started in an apartment in another town. And then I bought a house. Well, I started in many apartments before I could afford a house. And now I'm getting to a point where I think I'd like to downsize, or even like an over 55 or a bungalow. I don't know. But, will there be garages for like the houses? I'm curious of.
So the typical house that has a rear lane has a garage on that lane.
I'm sorry.
A typical house, almost every house in this development, the large lot houses are not on the rear lane.
Okay.
Because their lots are big enough that you can have a driveway and not wreck the facade of the house.
Okay.
Right, with a garage door being the whole house.
Right.
All the bungalows and row houses are on rear lanes. All of those houses, the bungalows, the row houses, and the large lot family houses are expected to have, at minimum, a carport, but probably a garage because of the weather in New England. Most
Right.
people prefer garages.
Right.
Most builders find that they're worth the investment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you could expect, a 1 to 2 car garage for most of these homes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would think that as people get old, well, I can only speak for myself, but that's on my to-do list, my next property. I want a garage,
Get a
because I
garage.
don't have one now. And a canal would be nice too. I do agree.
I should never have shown the
A canal, a kayak, I don't know.
I think, Jeff, what you're hearing is to win people over, put a canal in the next design.
Right, but.
It's tough with topography, let me tell you.
Now, what about like biking? Will the roads be big enough for
So,
bikes, or how will that
We,
work?
we do a lot of plans for cities, and we add bike lanes everywhere all the
Okay.
time, and we're huge bike lane advocates and promulgators,
Yeah.
proliferators. But in the neighborhoods we build, similar to most of the streets in Copenhagen, everyone drives so slowly that it's a safe place to bike in the middle of the street.
Okay, that's fair enough,
There's no street within this development that will welcome speeds of drivers that would cause you to want to have a bike lane.
Right, okay.
Now, if the state wants to put bike lanes in
No, I
Old
just-
Common Road
right.
or 110, that's
Yeah.
another discussion.
I mean, because, certain speeds, right, aren't conducive for bikes or safety-wise or width or whatever. So I was just curious, but it sounds like that it would be enough. It's hard to see on the map. I know it looks dense, but it's probably not as dense as it looks. Well, the property, the actual housing isn't taking up that whole piece that you have.
Right, what
there.
you're seeing there are hundreds of
boundary
lots,
line,
and then the
right.
houses sit on the lots.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. So, but anyway, thank you so much. It's been a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Linda?
Hi, I'm Linda Johnson. I live on Old Common Road as well, and I have some thoughts in no particular order. It does look dense. I understand, though, how the houses sit on the property, but it does look dense to me. I also am concerned, and I know, Steve, you said that Mill Street now would be accessible. However, I'm pretty sure our Mill Street neighbors aren't going to like the fact that they now become the thoroughfare north to south, and we are the thoroughfare from east to west on Old Common. It's a very busy road. It's a wide road. People, cyclists, dog walkers, cars. It's a cut through, and it is not safe. I don't think I would bring my grandchild trick-or-treating across that street in the dark. In no particular order, as I said, I don't know who's going to take care of a pool. Been there, done that. It's not going to be me.
I mean, that would be a developer choice.
Yeah,
honestly.
so that's a little bit tricky. Wait, there was one more thing. The density, the parking, and the bikes. I don't think anyone's going to be able to ride their bike through there that's going to be safe. It's quite dense, and people are going to use it as a cut-through. So it is concerning to me on that front.
So, not to disagree,
That's okay, you can.
but all the neighborhoods I showed you, the plans for the other neighborhoods that were designed with the same techniques as these, are full of cyclists who are very comfortable. I do want to share that information.
I believe you, because it is a training ground for cyclists in that neighborhood. So I just don't know that they're going to be going through there with people with baby carriages and the elderly and riding their bikes from, as I said,
Whether
north
they
to
want to
south.
cross Old Common or cross 110, I mean, that's a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
When I was touring that neighborhood of ours outside of Denver, that was the first project I showed, there were some folks sitting in the middle of a boulevard in a place we'd placed a bench, and I started taking pictures of them, and they got up and they nervously left, and I said, "Why are you leaving?" And they said, "Oh, we don't live here, we just drive here to sit." And other people came to walk their dogs. So people also come to bike. We model these neighborhoods. We do the best we can to copy the great neighborhoods that everyone loves. So we are very pleased to find when they have similar outcomes, like trick-or-treating, for example.
And I am one of those people that does get on the lot to walk my dog. Sorry.
That's all right.
Not supposed to be there. But it is beautiful to have it as much open space as we can, and it is a lovely spot. So thank you for the work.
Thanks, Linda. Alex, you were in line.
Hi, I'm Alex Turner, or Alexandra Turner from Main Street. So first I want to compliment you both on tonight's presentation and the previous one. It's very accessible. It shows a lot of creativity and respect for the character of our community. So so kudos. That's a tough thing to do. My questions are sort of more nuts and bolts than some of the ones that you've heard. When we were planning to build this school, actually, we did use UMass Amherst's planning because at that time the states were using a cohort survival, they called it, to plan for how many students to build for. And we anticipated that Lancaster was going to be a destination town, so we wanted to build it big enough that we didn't have to. So we did that and made our case to MSBA successfully. In your case, you're showing that the Lancaster is actually decreasing. So I wondered if you know, and if you don't know now, if you could share the methodology that they're using, because
I don't offhand know what their methodology is, but I do know that if you go to the UMass Amherst Donahue Institute's website, in fact, even simpler, Google Donahue population projections, there is a detailed description of their methodology that's behind these numbers. And I know Chris took great pains to say that these were not our numbers. We didn't put these together, and they're one model. And anytime you look at projections, it's only a model. It is not an absolute forecast. But the reason we found them important enough to show this evening, and frankly, when we found them, we were very surprised. They didn't show the trend we expected. But they really are. To me, if I were a Lancaster taxpayer, or even more if I was a teacher or someone working in the school, I would be actually quite concerned by those numbers in the absence of development that will bring some additional school children. Because it's difficult to sustain a school of this size with that level of decline of enrollment. And I think the community wants to keep a school. I can't imagine you don't. It's really one of the sort of key landmarks of almost any community and sense of community. And again, we don't know for certain that their numbers are the right numbers, but it at least, I think, puts two conversations in play around school children. There's one that was already brought up the last time, which is additional school children, a net increase, has an impact on the cost of delivering education to those students. But seeing these numbers, it's actually possible that those 850 bedrooms would not create enough school children to even make up the difference of what they predict will be lost in the next several couple, and it's not very far into the future. The big decline they're projecting is between 2030 and 2035. So it at least needs to be explored whether the town needs to actually cultivate more school children as much as it needs to manage the cost of expanding that. And similarly, the overall population projection raises some interesting questions about sustaining the population of the town. We also were a little surprised at first when we realized that if the 850 bedrooms turns into, say, 600 people, that's a sizable percentage of the current population of the town. But if you look at those overall population projections, adding 600 people actually in a couple of decades doesn't get you back to where you are today. And so, again, we're not here to tell you those numbers are gospel, but it does cause us to think about some different questions in parallel.
No, we're obviously proud, justifiably proud of our schools. We invest heavily in our schools, and they're the backbone of our community. So, it's good to support them. On the flip side, we also have extremely high taxes or tax burden, and if I know that part of the initiative of the state is to build more housing, to make housing more affordable, reduce property values, and by doing so, and my concern is it doesn't matter to me what my house is worth because I'm not planning on moving anytime soon. I'm vested in Lancaster. but it does affect, your tax rate, your total tax burden will go up. So, there's you've heard this from a lot of comments. Economics are definitely factoring into it. So the growth projections are one of the concerns. The other thing is, you made us aware last time, we weren't aware of the recent legislation that had passed that allows 4 acres on DCAMM, 4 units per acre on DCAMM land. And I look at this footprint that what you're utilizing. Does your 4 units per acre, your 396, count the land that you're not using or touching across the street, what we call the piggery? How many acres is this footprint, I guess?
So the land that they have designed this sort of new town or new neighborhood on is 63 acres. The total property is actually that the state owns is quite a bit bigger. The state actually owns the land that RFK is on. The state actually owns 12 acres in Bolton. The state does own the land across the street where the piggery is. None of that is part of this development area. And that calculation of the as of right housing that a developer could build is based on the acreage that is their lot. So the lot here would be 63, essentially simple math is 63 times 4.
Yeah, it's
That's
around
the floor.
250 units.
If we all just go home and we
Right.
sell this to somebody, that somebody can walk into your building department and demand permits for 4 times 63 units, whatever they look like, in whatever form they want to bring them in forward, and the town has to grant them. So really, we feel that's really not the best way to do it. And our strategy here is, again, to work with you and try to develop a plan that people feel good about. And then essentially, when we issue an RFP, that's the plan, not something else.
Understood.
And frankly, for that to work on the developer side, there are 2 things that are important. The density needs to be a little bigger than what they can just do as of right, so that they do the better plan. And again, I want to reiterate what Jeff explained earlier, which is the things about the neighborhood design that make it so attractive and so compelling, from the nature of the streets, the amount of walking areas, the amount of open space, the preservation of buildings, the preservation of trees, all of those things do cost money. And somehow that has to get paid for. And the only way that gets paid for is if there's enough of a profit in the overall project that a developer is willing to absorb those costs.
I understand.
And that's really why it has to be of a certain size to be able to make that possible.
Typically in zoning, a lot of times, if you're looking at that density requirement, it's upland, but this sounds like it's total acreage and not just, so wetland is included in there.
I don't think there is much wetland in this case. There's wetland buffer.
Just wetland buffer, almost no wetland.
The other question that came up last time, and I know you were going to look into it, was public utilities, water and sewer. Has that been, because that obviously determines density as well.
So we have started conversations with town officials, and we have started to understand a little bit better, but we have not gotten into sort of detailed engineering yet, because really we have to kind of land on what it is we're all aspiring to then do the engineering calculations and see if it can be, if capacity is sufficient to handle that, or if something needs to be designed and added to those systems. And then there's a whole nother math exercise around both the engineering analysis and then the cost analysis of can that cost be covered or not. And that's all stuff that really we needs to begin with understanding what the compelling plan vision is that we all generally have we're not going to reach full consensus, but that we all feel pretty good about. And then we can start doing that kind of analysis. Similarly, we did hear you all last time and heard you again this evening that traffic is a concern. And so while we will not have a fully developed, precise design of every building and exactly how big every building is going to be, we'll have these estimates. We are going to engage a traffic engineer to give us essentially an analysis memo to give us their impressions about how the what traffic impacts will come from the combination of this street design and the introduction of this amount of new building, so that we all are working from kind of a common understanding of what that will be. Some folks will find that to be acceptable, other folks will be concerned about those numbers, and we don't know what those are yet. Once we kind of land on a design, we will execute that and get that information out there as well.
It's a good place to start. And I'm assuming that it's too early to look at public safety and emergency access, because you're talking about some tall buildings and some dense buildings that people have said, so.
Well, the sort of porous street network that we provide, so there's
Yes.
many different paths to and from each house. The houses that are on pedestrian paths are also on those rear lanes, which are very short and broad enough to hold a vehicle, a fire vehicle. So, I mean, we have certain standards that we have to use in all of our plans that involve taking the templates of the fire truck and the garbage truck and all of that and making sure they fit. We found that the best thing you can do for health and safety is to create a low-speed environment. And so it's always a battle in communities. Do you make a wider street that allows the fire truck to speed and then everyone else speeds, or do you have tighter turns? We make sure they fit, but we don't want them going fast.
Makes sense. Garbage truck, you're a dreamer.
Yeah. I was going to say we don't have that.
But we want it.
Maybe you'll get
Right,
one.
I was going to say right there, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Regina? No, just you can just speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Regina Brown, 198 High Street Extension. Curious question for clarity. I keep hearing the developer. Is that like saying the Walmart, that there's multiple developers, but we're just saying the developer, or are we looking for one developer?
Well, I can tell you that 25,000 square feet will not be enough for Walmart to be interested. I know you'll be disappointed, but.
Trader Joe, get me a Trader Joe.
Anyway, no, we will be, we DCAMM, once we have basically an agreement with the town about the future development here, we will put out what we call a request for proposals, or an RFP, which will spell out that we're looking for a developer partner who will acquire the property and build to that vision, or build that vision. And one of the questions that came in by email is, how do we make sure it's that vision? And I think there's a couple of layers to that, frankly, that we have the advantage of being able to do here. The first layer is whatever the underlying rules turn out to be. And then the second layer is our RFP, which can dictate the terms. The third layer is, after we get a proposal, we will enter into essentially a development agreement with that developer, which will have further stipulations about what they have to do. And we'll have recourse if they do something different.
Okay. So
What we won't prescribe, and it's really important in thinking about the way developers finance projects like this in different ways, we will not prescribe their financing structure. We will not prescribe that they have to be the developer of every single building, that they may have the ability to sell individual lots and have someone build on a lot. They may have the ability to sell sections and have people to build sections of the development, or they may be a developer who has the capacity to do the whole thing and wants to do the whole thing because they see it as very lucrative. We will make one party responsible, but they very likely may have a bunch of sort of partners who do some of the work.
thank you. That answers a lot of questions, because, how do we get the pickleball court, or whatever we're going to call that thing?
Jeff, we're going to have to put the you put the thing on there now. People
How are
want
we getting the
pickleball.
canal?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we were just as
So-
surprised as you all by the pickleball.
So with that said, we have some intersections you're looking at changing, right? So
Correct.
we have the one down on 110, Still
Can
River.
you step closer to the microphone, Regina?
Okay, so we have the one down 110, Still River, Furbish Mill, whatever you want to call it, that we're going to change the structure of that. We're going to change the structure of Mill Street extension to Old Common, which quite frankly is near and dear to my heart. That's a very old intersection, but we're looking at changing that. Who is taking the cost and that burden of changing it? Is the town going to be responsible for part of it? Or is the developer going to take up all the cost of changing those intersections?
The hope and expectation here is that we can, again, arrive at a project that has enough value for a developer to capture that they can be responsible for building the things that it calls for. And that would be everything from intersection improvements to pickleball courts. But it really is going to be, there is going to be a balance there. The other lever that exists in that equation is the value of the property itself. And I can tell you the state is much more interested in seeing good quality housing and a good quality neighborhood than we are in making a buck on the land transaction. So the way that the state may help potentially is that if the economics of the development are such that they can't pay market value for raw land in Lancaster, but they agree to do some of these things that you see that are more than what a normal developer would do, then maybe they can pay less for the property to be able to cover those costs. But we don't yet know the math to know that all that works. And if the project gets bigger, it gets easier, but it may get less desirable in other respects. If it gets smaller, it gets harder to make some of those things happen.
Agreed.
And that's where we got to
I
kind of
just
figure it
don't
out.
want to see the town of Lancaster have to pick up costs to make this happen. And then I also think about like developments going in Leominster and developments that went in Sterling. And, you know, the developer was willing to make it, you know, let's say front yard friendly and make it the openings, and they took, I mean, even when the Walmart went in, they took care of the roads up there. So,
I think you're advocating for a Walmart.
the Walmart, no, I want the Trader Joe, but everyone says the Walmart, and there's multiple. Last question, and this is kind of a weird one, so it's just a thinker.
Go closer to the mic, sorry.
I know, I'm
You keep
sorry.
moving away from them. I don't know why you're.
So there's so much development going in Leominster. Right now behind Target, there's a whole big development going on. And a lot of it's going to be rentals, and they're going to have some single families and all that. How could that, which is much more desirable in some ways because you're right off Route 2, plus you have a Chili's there if you like Chili's, but it's more desirable. How could that make it maybe, and this is just food for thought, not an answer for today, but impact this development? So if you're thinking of bringing people from Arlington, Brookline, saying, come on out to the country, here they can be on Route 2, and here at the DCAMM, they have to travel 15, 20 minutes to get back to Route 2 or get, you know, through the mess of Bolton to get to 495. So it's just food for thought that we're not the only ones building right now.
Frankly, I hope not, because the report that came out a couple of months ago from the state said we've got to produce over 200,000 housing units just to catch up.
Absolutely.
We're not going to put 200,000 housing units here. So we do need some other sites to be built elsewhere in parallel in order to come even close to that goal. And frankly, I don't think we know where the people who are going to want to be here come from, other than I can guarantee you some of them are right here in Lancaster.
I'm sure.
Some of them may be your children, some of them may be people here who want to downsize, some of them may be people here who want to upsize. But I don't agree with you, and don't, please, I represent
okay.
the whole state, but don't tell anyone in Leominster. But I think Lancaster's a nicer place than Leominster, in my opinion.
It all depends on what you're looking for, right? So
Fair enough.
if you just want that commuter because you work in Boston area, then this is.
But see, Regina, I think you're answering your own question. The person who chooses that based on commuter is going to choose that one location.
Totally. It was just a random question. Okay, thank
We
you
love
very
it.
much.
Thank you.
I might sum that up by saying that we hope that the people that choose to live here in the future are choosing to live here for exactly the same reasons that you choose to live here. Whatever those reasons may be, sense of community, the quality of schools, the access to open space, the history and the heritage. We think that the folks that choose to live here are going to choose to live here for those exact same reasons.
Russ.
Russ Williston, 4 Highfield Drive. First, I want to say that the neighborhood looks beautiful. I really like the presentation, and even the presentation last month was wonderful. But just to echo what everyone else has said, it is a lot of units. And I think someone said it would increase the population of the town by 8%, and I think it's more than that. I think that That number of units that you put on the screen is 15% of the number of housing units in town currently. So it's a big chunk of the town. And it's at a time when we've already committed to a big 40A development in North Lancaster. That's 190 units. We have a college that will want to develop and add a lot of housing units. And we have and we need to approve an MBTA communities district that could contribute another 130 units if someone built as much as they could. And I was a little surprised by the number that you put up, the 330, because I expected it to stay much closer to the 4 units per acre that the state requires us to accept. And I think if you ask for more than that, it might be a non-starter with the town unless you can make a compelling case as to why it benefits the whole town. And not just to explain that we need more units to add amenities for the neighborhood, because that doesn't really interest the average person in town who might never drive through this neighborhood. But I think if you could contribute more affordable units, which you mentioned is still on the table, but you haven't made a decision yet, or if you can find a way for this to contribute to the MBTA communities district that we need to create, that might offer something to the town to allow a higher density like that. And I hope you'll do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Russ. Roy?
Roy Rizak, 125 Harvard Road. A couple of comments here and a couple of points. Lancaster has 3 key planning documents that are our vision and our plans for how we want to see Lancaster developed and expand. They are the Lancaster 2035 Comprehensive Plan, the Lancaster Housing Production Plan for 2024 to 2029, and the Open Space Recreation Plan, which is 2017 to 2024. My question is, did you review those, consider those when you developed this plan, this proposal?
I don't know that we've reviewed those in depth. We're familiar with them, but we will be sure to follow up with you and to read those and make sure that they're incorporated into future slides that you see from us. Absolutely.
Good. I think that's an important thing to do here.
We very much respect the work that was done to create those and the message that it is meant to send about the future of the community.
Okay. Second thing, just to comment on, relative to schools, there are what I would call linear costs. You add 3 more students, that's a known cost per student, and they continue to come to the same buildings we have now. Then there's the nonlinear costs. When we get to the point where, oops, we cannot put those students into that building, we have to expand. And it's one thing inside of Lancaster, which is one set of planning issues. It's another thing for the new Neshoba Regional High School that we're dealing with in funding, and for the fact that both Bolton and Stowe have committed to quite large developments on this order, if not larger, in their towns. We're going to need to see some projections combining all of that, particularly around the Neshoba Regional High School, because if we had to get into nonlinear costs there, that would be a significant issue. Also, relative to nonlinear costs, I don't know, I'm not a public safety metrics person, but my question will be, as we add this many homes and this many, you're talking 3 to 4 story buildings.
3.
3?
No, 4, yeah.
Okay.
3. Somebody
all right,
else
3.
said 4, but it's only 3.
Okay, all right. 3-story buildings. I don't know what that means in terms of, do we need additional fire apparatus in town and to be able to reach those 3rd stories and that type of thing. So that's another question there. Finally, I agree. The plans that you've shown seem very livable, hospitable places that an average person would like to be in. And I commend you for that and for the good work that you've done there. Clearly, the question is going to be around the costs and who pays the costs for things. I think not only about the costs have been talked about for some of the items, but not only for the sidewalks and the parks and those kinds of things. Parks would probably be, I would project, under the town's municipal costs on an ongoing basis. Sidewalks and these kinds of things. Now, who's going to deal with this, the cleaning of those when it snows and all that kind of stuff? Those questions are things we need to be, taken to mind. And you talked about a club here. question comes up, will this area wind up with a homeowners association that deals with those kinds of costs? I think that set of dialogue and discussion about who's going to cover those costs, both the initial development as well as the ongoing maintenance, will be important so we can understand what's the benefit to the whole town. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. All very good questions, and I hope you took it in good humor when I showed the photo of you under the town school and budget questions, because I knew that you would be thoughtful about those. So we don't have answers to all of those today, but you're raising very good questions that we hope to be able to address in the future. Thank you.
And I will say before you take your next comment, people are afraid of three-story buildings. A lot of homes in Lancaster have three. Our house, as the third story, was an attic. There are a lot of homes in Lancaster that have 3 stories. You know, it sounds much taller and bigger than most of our homes, but I would venture a guess. And also we have 4 bedrooms and we don't occupy every bedroom. So we just need to put some of this in context. And then Roy, as to the public safety, and I'm just vamping here, but to the public safety needs and the increased nonlinear costs you were talking about, remember all these units, those that are purchased, are paying taxes. So on top of that, you can get in the back, get behind Ralph if you want, but they are paying taxes. So this is not without the benefit of the tax revenue coming into town. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, that was one of the things I was going to ask.
Oh, there you go.
All these houses are purchased houses, and they're all paying taxes, so that it's not like the apartment buildings where it's a deficit to the town.
Yes.
But you mentioned the affordable housing, and with this many houses, and then you get the buildings that you could put the affordable housing in, how does that work out in the town's favor when is there going to be enough to offset, just to offset what you're building? How is it going to help us with our inventory to get us to the safe number? And the other question I had was what about the rest of the land? The buffer zone, the piggery, off to the right, the northeast corner, there's another section. Is that stay as DCAMM and open for future building, or is that going to go to the town, or is that going to be like locked in as it's not going to build? What happens to it?
Well, there are several different pieces with several different answers to that question, but pretty much all of them result in it's unlikely there's going to be much building beyond the 63 acres we're contemplating. And even on that, there is some wetland buffer zone that is unlikely to be built on. The area where the piggery is, we are in consultation with the Department of Fish and Game about whether that's something that they may take care and control of, and that may become protected land as part of this larger mix. We currently have legislation that the RFK property is to be conveyed to RFK. So that's not something that the state would be developing either whenever that moves forward. And those are probably the 2 biggest pieces at that point. There is the 12 acres that's in Bolton that at this point no decisions have been made about that. But other than that, I think everything is either protected in one form or another or subject to that other directive legislation.
Just to add and clarify 2 things, Commissioner, that legislation requires RFK to continue its uses on the site. It can't take that land and then turn around and develop it. So that's an additional restriction. And then just to clarify the comment about apartments versus owned units or condos, we don't know yet what the future ownership of, for example, some of the multifamily housing might be. It's possible that they would be rentals, but they would still be tax-paying rentals. So the town is still making tax revenue on all of the homes in the development, even if some of them are owned by one company or one real estate entity that is then renting out apartments or units within that.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Lisa D'Ambrosio. I live on South Meadow Road, which is kind of away from the area we're talking about. See, a project like this actually appeals to me personally. I think this is very different than what we've had in this town, and it's still kind of new for a lot of people. So I think people need to be more open, because I think this is actually the direction we need to go in as a state and as a country, even, I mean, these big houses on these big lots, which I have, and it's like, it's isolating. There's no sidewalks on South Middle Road. It's an old country road. People bomb down that road. You know, this is much more appealing to me. So hopefully it would be appealing to other people as well. That's all I want to say.
Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sir?
Hi, everyone. I'm Nick. I live on Squire Lane. I've lived here for 25 years, and I think the level of density is great. I went through the school system here, and this was at my elementary school. I saw a lack of economic diversity throughout my education, and I would argue the reason why is because of a lack of housing diversity and dense housing like this in the proposal throughout the town and the district. So I'm in favor of diverse types of housing that allow for diverse types of individuals to share their lived experiences like with each other. I think that's a huge benefit to communities, both diverse in terms of economics and in terms of age. So I'm not in favor of any sort of age-restricted housing, because if you like restrict it to a certain group, then people are just interacting with other people of the same group, and that doesn't encourage like passing down of like your knowledge, and that's like what you want, right? So I think that I could have benefited from that if I had had communities like this. Also, we're in a national housing shortage. So a project like this could be Lancaster's way of saying like, this is like our small piece of trying to address that problem. For me, that would make me feel proud being from here. And it also could address our MBTA Communities Act 40B and 40R problems. And something that I think is should be said again is this is currently state-owned land, so like when it gets sold, it will be increasing the tax revenue, right? Okay. And I would have been very excited to live in a place like this when I was a kid, particularly when I was in like middle school or high school, because I'd be able to like walk to my friend's house, which is something that I couldn't do. I like got driven across town, and that made me feel isolated, and I didn't like that. So I think it's really cool that Lancaster is proposing a dense area like this, and I hope it goes through.
Thanks, Nick. We're going to have you on the road show.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Talking about how great this is. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. We have 10 minutes to go. Ralph's got an 11-minute question, so Ralph, take it away. Yes, he did.
Ralph Gifford, 861 George Hill Road. Thank you for your presentation, both last time and this time. I really appreciated this. I love the thought that has gone into it. Two areas to tackle. One, what is currently Sand Road and would be extending. That is the one road in the layout that I would have a bit of concern, because it does look like it's almost a straight, highway. I use that word deliberately in this case. So I'm wondering what the thinking was for Sand Road, and what, if you have any concerns about speed and traffic on that particular road.
Our strategy always is to have more connections rather than fewer. So the idea of bringing it through makes sense to us. I do believe the street can be designed in a way that would limit speeding more than most of your country roads do now, that have shoulders and extra elbow room in them that cause people to go fast. I do think, however, we have not contemplated ways that the street could be modified with boulevard sections and a little turn here and there and other things that could make it safer. So I think your comments are well taken. I do, and you can probably picture the image I showed, I do think the very close hedgerows to the edge of that street would go a long way to limiting speeding on it. But it looks quite straight to me as well when I look at the plan, so that is something that we should look at some more.
Thank you. And I do appreciate being on the far edge. For those people who really are determined to cut through, it actually does, in a sense, separate them from the rest of the neighborhood. So that does actually tend to add a safety factor. So I'm not suggesting that this was a totally bummer of an idea, but I was interested in your thinking on that. Chris, were you about to say something before going? Okay. The density, I think, is the thing that I take over and over is a bit daunting. And I was trying to think of other parts of Lancaster where we have higher density. I don't believe we have anything quite this dense, but it would be interesting to compare this density with the density in South Lancaster. We have neighborhoods in South Lancaster that are quite dense. And to be able to compare those densities, I think, might help people relate or understand what level of density we're talking about here. And one thing, and I don't know yet how we could accomplish this, but this would require work with the planning board. One thing that would definitely be wonderful, if this level of density can also be incorporated in our zoning and our planning in such a way that we're able to free up other land to be valuable and usable for farming, for open space, for forestry, and that sort of thing. So if we can couple this with the big picture planning, it could potentially take us away from sprawl, which has essentially characterized a lot of zoning and planning for my entire lifetime. And part of that was driven by utilities. People needed more space to be able to deal with water and septic systems and that sort of thing. So obviously we're going to need the kind of infrastructure that Alex was asking about earlier to support something like this. But by having that infrastructure, that really opens up a much bigger planning opportunity that could be really beneficial to Lancaster, and that is why the density doesn't necessarily, in fact, I see the density as potentially a significant advantage if we can couple this with the big picture planning. Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph.
Thanks, Ralph. And I joked that Ralph was going to take the last 10 minutes, but he only took half of it, so thank you, Ralph. Sorry. No, yeah.
Hi, Dean Mellis, Squire Cheryl Lane. Hey, so traffic, really concerned about that 110 interchange. That's like, seems like an accident waiting to happen because you got 3 roads that coming down 110 pretty fast. Do you go straight? Do you go sideways? So I'm sure the traffic study you guys are going to do, take that into account. Same with the Mill Street thing. I'm just worried that we might need a light, and we don't have that many lights in town. So I'm worried that we're gonna need something because it's just gonna be a little crazy.
Yeah.
Can I say, sir, that
yeah.
I've only been here a few times. You have a lot of a number of intersections in this town, both signalized and stop sign, that are not safe.
Yes.
That don't feel safe.
I know.
Well,
I'm not disagreeing with you.
And the dog leg in 110 and the way it intersects at an angle with the continuation of that road, replacing that with a standard X intersection with an all-way stop sign, because there's not enough volume for a signal, would make it much safer than it is currently.
Yeah.
I don't think we have the traffic to call for a roundabout. I like roundabouts too, but a simple always stop would make that intersection a lot safer. And the same thing could happen.
Would be fine.
The same thing could happen at the Mill Road extension.
Mill Street.
Mill Street extension.
But part of those things is also, because we all know Five Corners is probably the most dangerous intersection in town. I know it's Four Corners. I know. Yeah. I know it. Oh, I know it's. I know it's still very dangerous. But these types of changes will help alleviate some of the traffic that goes through Five Corners as well. So hopefully, with a 4-way stop and some changes, we can try to create more safe spots, because that is still very dangerous intersection.
So I'll also say, I know people concerned about density. Have you guys seen the developments going on in Marlboro right now?
Oh,
crazy. Route 20,
yeah.
And even the middle of town, 8 stories high, crazy developments going on there. So I think this is what developments are now, not what they were 30, 40 years ago. This is what they are. I grew up in Brooklyn, which, like you said, walkable, could walk to my friend's house. All the garages were in the back. right? The alleyways, I had my best basketball games in those alleyways in the back of the garages, right, facing each other. I'm assuming that's what you meant by alleyway, just for garage space. So I kind of like the idea of more affordable houses for people, putting up single-story, 700,000, whatever, housing, which is what goes for in Lancaster, would be nice, but I probably would prefer even more. I know people are going to be mad at me, but more density to say, let's get some more affordable housing in, because I'd rather have the bungalows and the other things so that people, when they downsize, could stay in town, which they all love staying in town. We're going to have to deal with some traffic and some other issues. It's just the way it's going to go. But I feel like this is where we are in this stage of, planning and things like that. And it's not the Marlboro mega projects with eight-story buildings with probably, crazy amounts of stuff.
Sir, if I could coach you a little, when
Yeah.
you speak on behalf of this project at town meeting, just don't mention that you're from Brooklyn.
Don't mention, you don't like Brooklyn? This
No, I'm just saying
this
that-
is
that-
exactly what Brooklyn
Just-
is.
no, just
all
don't-
of Brooklyn
don't
looks
say
just
that
like this.
either.
If you can say it if you're wearing a Red
I didn't
Sox
say I
hat.
was a Yankees fan.
Yeah,
I
there
did
you go.
not say I was a
Exactly.
Yankees fan.
Yeah.
I'm a Mets fan, so I'm not a Yankees fan.
Well, Dean,
So-
you and Nick are from a very active street. You guys are both from the same street, and
Yeah.
both very. Oh, is your dad? Well,
Yeah.
that's easy.
So we
then.
both-
It's an easy commute with the two of you. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can go together.
Yeah, so
thank you very much.
I think it's great.
Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to yield to the town administrator, who will take the last 3 minutes. Not a second more, John.
Okay, I'll make it quick.
We got to turn. There you go.
Just real quick about process as we move forward. A lot of the questions and concerns that are being raised about the off-site impacts are great questions that will get more fleshed out at a later date. It won't necessarily be addressed in the zoning change process. After the zoning change process goes through and they start working on the RFP, there will be conversations about things that should they be incorporated into the RFP. If not, once the developer actually starts to create plans to move this forward, it's going to be going through a number of different regulatory approval processes, both throughout the state level as well as the local level. And that's where there's going to be traffic study done, water use study, sewer generation, traffic generation. All those types of things will get fully fleshed out at that time, and those are going to be and that's when the opportunity is going to be for the town to ask for some of these improvements, and whether the developer does it or whether the town, whether the state provides grant support through their variety of different grant programs. That's where that type of off-site mitigation. Not that the state likes to hear that phrase necessarily going to a developer, but that's where those things come into play, and that's where the town protects itself to make sure that whatever happens is mitigated and doesn't make anything worse, and ideally makes things better.
Thanks, John. All right, well, one final round of thank yous. Thank you to the Select Board for the work they're doing. Thanks to John. Thanks to Speck Dempsey. Thank you to the Commissioner and all of DCAMM. And thanks, of course, to our friends at Sterling-Lancaster Community TV for recording this and broadcasting it. And thanks, most importantly, to all of you for being active members of the community and for sharing your thoughts. This won't be the last time you'll get a chance to do that, but want to say a big thanks to all of you. So give yourself a round of applause. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, Steve, for moderating. We ask a lot of Steve in this process. As you know, he has a very busy day job, but he's taken time to be our guide through a lot of this. So thank you, Steve. And then just as a reminder, we'll be in front of the Select Board next week. It will not be a presentation to the same extent as this, but it will be kind of a continuing of the conversation. And then 2 weeks from today, we expect to be in front of the Planning Board to sort of start the conversation with the Planning Board. Again, no proposals, no zoning discussed at those meetings, but just continuing the conversation and giving you all an opportunity to learn more and to provide more public input in front of your public officials and your appointed officials. So thank you so much for being a part of the process.